So I got a question from a user called Mr. Mantra 875, and you say, Day 2 of asking how to silence the voice inside your head. Now I think on the spiritual path, that's like the most interesting thing. We want that peace, that silence. We want to be free of that loudness, of that noise in the mind that's constantly telling us that something is wrong. But I would like to encourage you to face that loudness, to allow this noise in your mind to be as it is. You see, because as long as one tries to silence the mind, then that one will never experience a silent mind. There's actually no real effective method to silence the mind, because the one that's doing the method is already a kind of noise. But when you're just allowing what is, then there's the chance for the mind to become quieter and quieter. See, there's a duality between what actually is, and when there are thoughts, then that's what actually is. So that's the duality between that reality and this separate entity that says, I want to have a silent mind. That separate entity that wants to use a method to quiet the mind. And that's the conflict. And most of the time when we try to quiet the mind, then it's not because those thoughts hurt. It's actually something that's deeper. Because thoughts don't hurt. It's this feeling, this tightness. This negative feeling is the source of negative thoughts. If you would feel good, but you would think negative thoughts, then you wouldn't care about silencing the mind. So allow negative thoughts to be, but also really, as consciousness, realize that you, the conscious awareness, are one with the feeling. You see, the separate self sees itself as separate from the negative feeling, and therefore it's trying to do something to heal that feeling, but the awareness is one with the feeling. So you just feel it. You are just there. You're not judging it. And maybe you notice that when there's this stress or just negativity or sorrow, when that's just allowed and you're no longer trying to use a method to get rid of it, you're just allowing reality to be as it is. And you really sink into that negative feeling, whatever type of negative feeling it is. Maybe you notice that the thoughts become quieter, because now finally you are where they want to point you to. You see, because negative thoughts want to let you know that you should look at this. When you're finally surrendering to the fact that you don't feel good. Then it becomes quiet. And you feel a sense of authenticity. You're really connected to what is, what you feel. And automatically you'll feel that consciousness is embracing that negative feeling, so it is allowed to be there. So it is actually possible to feel peace even though there's a negative feeling. So you don't have to know how to silence the mind. You know what? There are a lot of gurus that tell you that you have to use this method or that method to quiet the mind, and once it's quiet, you're enlightened. But you know, the one that wants to become enlightened is this separate entity that thinks it's responsible of that feeling. It wants to get rid of that feeling. So it is looking for a method, and the method is called, I need to become enlightened, because when I'm enlightened, there is no such thing as suffering. And therefore, I listen to gurus. Gurus tell me to quiet the mind, so I need to quiet the mind. And once it's quiet, there's no suffering anymore. But you cannot really use a method to quiet the mind so that the suffering will go away then. You have to be with the suffering, and then that will quiet the mind. So there's no way to go around that suffering to avoid it. Consciousness embraces that pain. Consciousness embraces thoughts. The separate entity wants to get rid of pain and thoughts. And that means that you give up. There's no longer this self-image that wants to project a happy face outward. So you're all the time, you're real. You are real with yourself all the time. That means when you are in pain, then that can actually be seen in your face. You're no longer trying to put on a mask. And when you're happy, you're actually smiling. When you're bored, then you're actually experiencing boredom pure. There's no separate entity that's experiencing boredom. There's just pure boredom. And when there's thinking, then there's just thinking, and there's no separate entity that's judging the thinking process. But you really have to connect to the source of your problem. And when the problem is negative thoughts or a noisy mind, too much thoughts, why is that a problem? If you would feel good, if the thoughts would be positive, then you wouldn't ask a question like that. So I assume that the thoughts are not positive. When the thoughts are not positive, then they only feel negative because there's a negative feeling. So really go to the root of why you are even asking such a question. And the root is probably because there's stress or a longing for something that isn't here already. There's unhappiness. So really stop trying to find a way to end that unhappiness. Just accept unhappiness. So thoughts are here, unhappiness is here. And when that is just allowed to be, then suffering ends immediately. Go to the root of why you are asking that question. And the root is something you don't want to feel, is uncomfortable, but be with it, and you will find your answer there. I'm not giving you an answer actually, but you'll find your answer when you are feeling the root from where your question came from. And then there's just innocent being, innocent acceptance. Then whatever's experienced is no longer known, it's no longer judged. Because there's no longer this someone that wants to change it, fix it, or improve it, whatever.